Okay, well, Holly, thank you for joining us. And we really appreciate both your participation in our project and your sharing this presentation today.
Thanks, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share some of this information with you. Thinking about sustaining riparian health and wetland habitats is very near and dear to my heart. I've been working on the San Pedro River doing that for about 25 years. And even though I'm going to be focusing on cottonwood willow an ecosystem along the San Pedro, I think a lot of the concepts and the work that's been done here is very transferable to other types of riparian and wetland ecosystems as well. So this is kind of a case study for you to think about today in what we've accomplished over a couple decades. Thanks. Next. So I guess one of the first questions that everyone has is riparian health, kind of what is it as it relates to water availability? And how do we know if an ecosystem has enough water? And in terms of cottonwood willow ecosystems, you kind of see this transition from what we call kind of a very wet and healthy ecosystem on the top where it's perennial flows. There's abundant vegetation, not only in the canopy, but understory vegetation, dense, wonderful, diverse habitats with an array of all kinds of wildlife. These are really important migratory corridors, and they play a huge role in kind of overall landscape diversity. But as groundwater pumping and drought, those combination of factors starts to deplete groundwater around these systems. We start to see changes like in that center picture where, and you can see the schematics on the right as well, where the vegetation starts to maybe change in terms of the composition of what's there. It's no longer maybe cottonwood willow, maybe more tamarisk, mesquite. And those plants can't really reach the groundwater as well anymore because it's starting to drop. Groundwater storage gets depleted over time if it's not replenished, and we start to lose the water in the stream itself. But in that bottom picture, and we see a lot of rivers in the desert Southwest that look like the bottom picture, that used to look like the top picture, where the water is basically beyond the root zone of the riparian or wetland vegetation. We see a real huge conversion to another vegetation type, and it has very significant ecological impacts. So what we've been trying to do on the San Pedro is keep that top picture and maintain that groundwater availability. Next. Along the San Pedro, just to give a little bit of context, is that National Riparian Conservation Area shown is that long pink strip in this slide. This is the watershed. It actually flows out of Sonora, Mexico into the US. And so it's about a 40-mile long conservation area that has been known for many decades to be incredibly important for the migration, particularly of bird species, kind of at a hemispheric level. This migratory corridor really serves an important role. Next. So over time, there's been a real collaboration between local and federal agencies to keep this, this important habitat very healthy and to understand where groundwater withdrawals may be impacting or not the stream flow and the vegetation. And you can see there's a map of the riparian conservation area on the right. Some of those reaches are in blue, others are in green. The blue reaches were that top picture where it's the most robust riparian health. The green ones are those that are starting to transition to a drier type. And so all those little purple numbers and projects are projects that were strategically located to enhance groundwater along the river where it is changing kind of the most. So along the international border is where we see the most rapid changes in terms of this condition. Also in those reaches numbered 3 and 4, we're seeing a lot of transition as well. I'm going to talk about a couple of these projects, but what I really wanted to say on this slide is that regional groundwater modeling can tell you where you need projects along a river to keep the groundwater levels at an adequate level. And without that kind of big picture science, it's very hard to know where to do recharge along a natural system like this. Okay. So a couple of things. One is that the closer you pump to the river, the more direct the impacts. And this just shows the elevation of groundwater when a new irrigation facility came online right next to the river. But in the late 90s and the early 2000s, the depths of the groundwater just plunged from this one irrigated operation that was right on the riverbanks. And it was actually retired and that groundwater level restored. This was from a private well that was like miles away from that irrigation. So the first thing I would say is it's easier to protect groundwater and to minimize pumping than to recharge it after the fact. So if you can think about that, minimizing those impacts near these areas first, that actually is your most effective measure. But you can't always do that because sometimes we're using water along these places already. Next. So the other thing I want to say before talking about stormwater recharge is that it's occurring all the time, naturally. So this is actually just a graph that shows the flood peaks along the Babakamari River in those little blue spikes and how the groundwater aquifer responded in terms of the replenishment of groundwater during every flood flow. Those gray bars are the monsoon season, and you can see that every monsoon season, that depth to water is really, it really benefits from those seasonal flood flows. So the importance of floodplain recharge cannot be understated. And again, this is something that, it makes a lot more sense to protect these natural systems and to allow them to recharge than to upset that natural balance and then have to do a lot of artificial projects to make up for it. Next. But speaking of
webinar we're trying to do.
Speaking of artificial projects, I do want to mention that our urbanization does have impacts on both flood flows and groundwater and natural systems. This is actually the urban area of Sierra Vista, Arizona, just upstream of the National Riparian Conservation Area shown on the right, with a major tributary that goes right through downtown and dumps into the river. And this is actually a real opportunity and a problem all at once, because that urbanized area has a lot of impervious surfaces that deliver a lot of more water during flood events to that channel than would have naturally occurred. So you get erosion, you get accelerated runoff, you also get some water quality concerns, all of a sudden going down this tributary into the San Pedro. So that Coyote Wash stormwater tract that you can see in green, that was acquired to actually turn this problem into a resource. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. So this extra runoff, sometimes it's called urban enhanced runoff. This is just a hydrograph that shows in the pre-development of a watershed what a flood flow would look like is that bottom line. And then after urbanization, that top line is the post-development flood flow. And the difference between those two is, in fact, additional runoff that would not occur without the development. That additional runoff can be a real resource if you can recharge it. This is some actual, the graphics aren't great, but this is some actual HEC1 modeling of Coyote Wash. And this is the 2-year event. The blue line is the post-development current runoff pattern. The little teeny brown line on the bottom is what would have occurred naturally at this recharge location. And so look at the difference in the 2-year event between pre and post-development. Compare this with the next slide, which shows a much bigger 50-year storm. So as the storms get bigger, that pre and post-development runoff gets a little bit more similar, but those smaller events are actually very different. And that's where you can harness additional water for recharge and really utilize those smaller storms to capture water and improve groundwater storage. Next. So the next question is where in the channel you want to do that. And there's different ways to show where you can infiltrate water the best and where that those infiltration rates will be the greatest. This is a kind of a profile down the Coyote Wash channel showing where water could best infiltrate into the channel. That's where you want to try to really increase the availability of stormwater to the aquifer, if you will. So this is where how we sited a recharge facility within that channel downstream of Sierra Vista. Next. This is actually an abandoned gravel pit next to the river channel that was excavated to capture those small 2-year events that would not have flowed if there wasn't a city there. And so it captures those events and then slowly releases them to that natural channel just upstream of where that infiltration is the best. So we're really maximizing how that extra city water can get into the aquifer and recharge the groundwater supplies near the riparian area. This is another project. This is Horseshoe Draw. You can see the international border fence on the top of the photo, that black line. There's a very healthy Sackatone floodplain upstream of this new basin, but you can see downstream of the basin looked really highly eroded. There's a big head cut that was going up this channel. One of the things that the ATOR study has really identified as important is trying to get kind of multiple benefits and to partner recharge with other types of projects. This was an erosion control project that was actually constructed to also provide recharge benefits. And what it does, like Coyote Wash, is it captures the high flood peaks and slowly releases it to that channel downstream. And we've seen significant additional recharge downstream of the basin because it gives more time for that water to sink in. Next. This is some of the monitoring downstream of the basin. You can see that the precipitation of those black dots every year, highly variable. You can also see the recharge is highly variable. But what you can notice is that the detention basin, the dark blue of each bar, is relatively small compared to the light blue, which is what recharges downstream in the natural channel, in addition to what would have recharged if the basin was not there. I could talk a lot about these data, but it's really interesting to see how you can help natural systems be more effective when there is accelerated runoff and erosion. So I just say that working with the natural systems as nature-based solutions can be really effective, and especially when they provide projects like this provide multiple benefits like sedimentation control, erosion control, and recharge. Here's just some lessons learned real quick. Again, the pre-development and existing runoff volumes, they can both be quantified and estimated and compared. So you can actually determine how much extra runoff might be available for recharge. The number, duration, and magnitude of storm flows likely will increase due to urbanization and/or watershed conditions. And frankly, those problems can also be solutions if you think about them creatively. Urban runoff provides this source water for aquifer recharge and again provides these multiple benefits all at once if designed thoughtfully. And these projects increase not only groundwater storage, but restore natural flood flows. And I would like to put a pitch in for the fact that flood disturbance is a natural process. It's essential to regenerate these natural habitats. And we have to respect those and hopefully even restore them as part of these projects. So that relatively natural flood flow regime can actually shape and support those riparian ecosystems downstream and are just as important as providing groundwater availability. I also just want to say in a follow-up to the stormwater conversation that likely if there is significant pumping in a basin, stormwater recharge may not be enough to sustain groundwater storage over time. And so the use of treated effluent from wastewater facilities can be incredibly important and useful. It's a very steady supply of source water for recharge, and it only increases as does development and pumping. This is a shot of the Sierra Vista Environmental Operations Park, the wetlands where they treat the water before it is recharged back into the aquifer. Overall, all these projects, those purple dots that were shown along the river, we quantify the benefits of them every year in terms of the actual recharge of the projects, how much pumping has been retired in key areas, and also how much pumping is actually precluded in very sensitive areas near the river where conservation easements have ensured that future pumping will never occur. So kind of in summary, the challenge for riparian ecosystems is that basically their water needs include unaltered flood flows in terms of, pre-development conditions, access to shallow groundwater, and also water quality. And that's a lot to consider in today's water management world. And urbanization obviously impacts all of these, increasing the runoff, the flood peaks, the erosion, degrading water quality, in addition to pumping that can decline water levels regionally and certainly near floodplains. So solutions on the upside is to increase the infiltration of urban or accelerated runoff for groundwater storage in near stream areas. This is a real resource. To really be thoughtful about any existing high volume pumping near streams where impacts are most direct. To preserve open space within active floodplains where recharge is already naturally occurring, and to recognize that value and process. And then really over the long term to create a diverse portfolio of sources of water for recharge, and to complement kind of the unpredictable stormwater that could be used as source water with high quality treated effluent. And think of that as a portfolio of different water sources that together can help to manage particularly those most sensitive areas near these natural systems. And that's it. And there's a website that talks more about these projects if you're interested. Just wanted you to have that web address.